Okay, so we'll get started on this webinar. This is our third session out of 3 we're doing. We may do others if there is interest, but Mary Crow Canyon, Mary at Cooper Compliance, and Crow Canyon, me at Crow Canyon, we have done 2 of these already, one in I think January, then the other in February, and now this is the third one on NERC Compliance, how to use SharePoint or Office 365 for NERC compliance purposes. So okay, Mary's going over. We have we have 2 companies here. One is Cooper Compliance, and the other is Crow Canyon Systems. We're both based in Northern California. Cooper Compliance is run by Mary Cooper, who will be leading this presentation. She has worked in the electrical compliance industry for almost 30 years, I believe, and specifically on NERC compliance. Her practice was consulting the electrical industry on NERC compliance rules as they were coming out over the last 20 or so years, and out of her practice of consulting, she developed this tool called Global Audit Ready, which is a program that helps manage audits and compliance on SharePoint and Office 365. She also does consultate, NERC consultants, outsource compliance, mock audits, training, control development. She can talk more about that, as well as this new TVMP inspection tool. We'll go into that in a moment. Give Mary a chance to talk about it when she takes over the presentation. I am with Crow Canyon Systems. My name's Scott Restivo. We've been around almost 20 years ourselves doing software development on the Outlook and Microsoft Exchange platforms, but started there, but now we're heavily into SharePoint and Office 365 development. We're one of the leading developers of applications on that platform. We have clients all around the world using our help desk, asset management, security access requests, HR systems, equipment tracking, a whole range of applications we do, including custom projects, custom SharePoint development projects for corporations. So we're very glad to bring you this webinar and this training opportunity. And I think right now we can move on to Mary, except, that's right, I have to explain a little bit about the housekeeping on the webinar. We will, as you can see, everybody who's attending is on listen mode. Mary and I are the ones who get to do the talking, I guess. But there is an opportunity in the GoToWebinar window to ask questions. Just type them in, and we'll get to those as we can. Usually we'll go through a section. Mary will go through a section of her presentation. Some questions may come up, and we'll try and answer them there, either in the webinar or in the in the question window itself. There's a place where we can type our answers. The first thing we'd like to do to kind of guide the presentation is to ask this one question about what version of SharePoint are you using. So I'm going to launch this poll right now, give about 15 or 20 seconds for people to answer that question, and then we can proceed from there. So it should be up on your screen. Please select one of these versions of SharePoint, and appreciate your responses. Okay, that's it says 100% of the people voted. That's I think a new one from my webinars. It's most times it's less, but let's see what the results are. I'll close the poll, and we'll launch the results here. Closed and share. I guess share the results is what we're. Here we go. So now we're looking at the results of this poll. We see a large number of people. The largest majority is the majority are on SharePoint 2010. And then there's 2013 and some use of Office 365 and some use of 2007. So that's good. That's good information. Thank you very much for that. And Mary, I'll pass the baton to you to go forward with your presentation there. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Before I get going, I just like to let everybody know I'd like to apologize in advance. I caught a jungle bug last week, and so I have a pretty bad cough. I'm going to try not to cough during this presentation. And also, one other thing I just wanted to bring up is our new product. We have a very simple transmission vegetation management protection or plan inspection application that we just developed. Very simple, gets the job done, very effective way of putting a control to your transmission vegetation management program. And we're selling that for just $3,000. So if you're interested in seeing that, just let me know. There's contact information at the end of this presentation. So I'm going to go right into a quick review of what we've already done. And these presentations are all located on the Cooper Compliance site under, you can see tutorials. We have our first session where we discuss best practices of storing documents in SharePoint. We talked about the 3 types of documents that you might use.
Mary, it's a little low. I don't know if you can speak a little louder. For me, it's low. Maybe my ears are going, but I mean, it might be for other people too. So, just sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to point that out to make sure everyone can hear you sufficiently. Okay.
Okay. Is this better, Scott?
Try again.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, I think that's better for me. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Is it? I mean, I can call in on another line.
No. That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
We can always raise the volume if we have to on our headsets. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, because I'm trying to talk. I'm trying to talk as loud as I can, given my vocal cords too are a little sore. Okay, so the 3 types of documents that you would use in SharePoint are those that have version control, and then we talked about the other documents that you would collect for like periodic submittals or email transactions, things like that that come in where you would need each piece of evidence to demonstrate compliance. And then also we talked about how to use logs and how you can have links to logs to maintain, and those would be another type of evidence that you would use for managing compliance. We talked about using a process-oriented approach where you would identify first how you comply with each of the requirements by documenting out your process. It's, in my experience, it's rather important that an entity first identify how you comply with the requirement before you can identify what evidence is going to be relevant to that particular requirement. So we talked about that approach and how you would map the evidence to your process, then mapping that to the requirement. So we talked about the benefits and the fact that it's going to, most importantly, cause you to become less of a librarian and more of a compliance manager, so that you're not having to shuffle around documents trying to decide which folders they go into. So this approach you can view in the previous recording. We also had a brief presentation on how to use Office Mix, another free SharePoint add-on, or not SharePoint, but Microsoft add-on. So it's an add-on to PowerPoint where you can record questions, pull out statistics, identify who took which test at each time, get the results. All of this can be used to demonstrate that you have good internal controls within your NERC compliance program. So please go to the Cooper Compliance website and look under tutorials if you would like to see any more information about that presentation. This second session covered multi-part authentication. We stepped through how to turn it on in SharePoint 2013, and also there's some guidance on SharePoint 2010 and on-premise that you can follow. We talked about how to modify SharePoint lists to build controls. We went into great detail on this using another Microsoft free product, SharePoint Designer. Using SharePoint Designer, we also showed you how to develop a loop workflow to be able to loop through lists and send out notifications when due dates arise. You can use this for many aspects of NERC compliance. For example, you can use it to loop through an equipment list when you're monitoring when maintenance is due, one of the higher violated standards. You could use it to loop through a list of your cyber systems, loop through a list of your employees to make sure that they've conducted all their training for the SIP requirements, and so forth. So there's several uses for those loop workflows using the out-of-the-box SharePoint Designer. So again, go to the Cooper Compliance site, look at the tutorials, and you can view that as well. Okay, so today what we're going to do is I wanted to really, again, focus on controls, and in this time we're going to focus on how to collect and display changes in SharePoint. I'm going to look at what SharePoint auditing tools have. They're not that great in a lot of ways, but they do provide some basics. We're going to talk about another trick in tool, and that is using the append multi-line text capabilities. And I'm going to show you how to create a SharePoint page to view all the results in your multi-line text. You'll understand more about what this is when we go through the example that I'm going to provide. And then we're going to lastly talk a little bit about record declaration. I realized I had too much planned for today's session. I wanted to stay timely, so we're going to ask you at the end of this session if you would be interested in further another training session just on the record declaration capabilities. Okay, so basically, in general, SharePoint in itself, in its own design, has a lot of controls built in, a lot of capabilities. I love SharePoint myself. I think it's a great tool. The more you learn about it, you'll find that it has an outstanding capabilities up and beyond a normal folder structure that a lot of people tend to lean towards. We like to move, we really never use a folder structure in SharePoint, because when you do, you lose capabilities. I talked about that a little bit in our last two sessions, so I'm not going to focus on that today. But one of the things that, for example, is you can maintain a record of change. If I have version control on, I can go back and see my prior documents. I can see who changed what and when. I can view historical records, recover history. So if I'm sitting here and making changes in my document, and I've got it on SharePoint, I'm synced to SharePoint, something happens to my document, I can go back and recover. It's very easy. It's easy to undelete a record. If you accidentally undelete a record, it's very easy to retrieve it. And it provides an audit record, most important for NERC compliance. So next, what I would like to talk about is the SharePoint audit tools. So SharePoint has some audit tools built in. For each site collection has an audit log. You can view things such as the item name and location, site from which an event originated, the item type, for example, if it's a list or document, the user ID associated with the event, the change, the event date and time, and the action taken on the item. However, what it does not show you in the audit logs is what was changed. So again, we're going to look at another way to view what was changed. And then it And then lastly, it requires some manual manipulation to interpret those logs. So I'm going to show you what a log looks like and how, and then briefly talk about some of the ways that you can manually manipulate it. So what's tracked? So the types of things that can be tracked with these audit tools are the content modifications. I can tell if something's been modified, but I can't tell what was modified. I can tell when something was deleted. So if a document is suddenly deleted, you can go to those audit tools and try to figure out what happened and who deleted it, when they deleted it. The content type and lists of modifications, I will tell you what type it is. The policy modifications, expiration, and disposition. So if you have a policy turned on, when something expires, you can pull that report out and see that. Security settings. So if somebody was added to a group that allowed them to be able to view access to those controls, you can pull that out for audit purposes. This is something that you can use for the SIP standards to show who has access to your critical information. And you can build custom reports, but the custom reports don't add any additional features. They just allow you to customize those reports, which you can do using Excel once a document is created. Here's an example of an audit report for security settings. So you can see it's not very user-friendly. I can see who changed, who was the user ID, who made the change, when they made the change, what type of event it was, if they were, in this example, a security group member added or a security group member was deleted, and then it will provide me under event data a little bit more information as to who was added. So somewhat useful for identifying who has access. Again, it's not real easily read, but this is Excel, so you can use some of your Excel features and capabilities to maybe build different graphs or eliminate some of the data and make it a little bit more easier to read. So just wanted to show you that this is what the security settings report gives you. Here's what the content modifications report gives you. So again, I can see that a list was changed. It gives me the list by ID or the list item, so I know which ID was changed. If I export that list out, and into Excel, I can use some lookups to find out a little bit more information about what item was changed, but it doesn't tell me what was changed. Again, it's useful in some cases. So what would be the benefits let me just switch over here. What would be the benefits? So the benefits of using this is it provides audit tracking for changes to permissions. It identifies where poor use occurs, poor use of SharePoint, so that you can go and offer training to people to prevent them from doing things that you really wouldn't want them to do. And then it also helps you in disaster recovery. So if a certain item was deleted and you needed it, at least you know the date and the time, so it's easier for disaster recovery. So how to turn on audit logs is, here's some very simple instructions. I am not going to go through and demonstrate this. It's going to be different for SharePoint on-premise versus SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2010 versus SharePoint 2013. But basically, it's in your settings. You're going to modify all settings, and this just provides some instructions. You're going to go in and just simply turn on the audit settings. I like to automatically trim it. You'd want to say yes, and then because then you can identify where that report will be stored. So if I trim it every 30 days, then I can collect the audit reports for each month, and it will be stored in a document library that I've established for those reports in my SharePoint. You can specify the events to audit if you want to audit editing items, checking out or checking in times, moving or copying items to another location, deleting or restoring items. And you can specify the events to audit, editing content types and columns, searching site content. Maybe you want to see how often somebody views a certain area of your website. And most important one that I see here is editing user permissions. Are there any questions on how to, on the auditing features of SharePoint, Scott?
I don't see any at this point. Let me check again. I just checked. No, there were questions about other things, but not that.
Okay. All right, great. So what I want to do now is go into and talk about other ways of being able to audit what happens in SharePoint. So I'm going to give an example of EOP 4-2 bar 3, which requires you to validate your emergency, your event contacts each year. So what we do to do this is we maintain a list of contacts on SharePoint. We add a field, a validation field, to log each time the contact is validated. And then we create a separate page to view, to print the audit records, to view and print the audit records. So I'm going to walk through a use case of how you can do this. There's many other benefits to this same feature that we've used, such as meeting notes to track project status. We work with one of our clients with Southern California Edison in the city of Pasadena, where we meet each month, and that we have a laundry list of projects each time we meet to discuss. And we use this feature as we assign out tasks and track who has done what each month. So that's another benefit to using this feature that I'm going to show you. Others are training records. You can print out a report that shows the history of training by employee, and then document version history. If you want to use SharePoint as the tracking mechanism to identify the version history, you can actually use the same feature and pull in that version history and print it out on a report. So I'm going to show you how you can view that whole version history with some manipulation of a web page. This manipulation is going to, we're going to use SharePoint Designer again to create that page. So, the first step that you're going to need to do to use the version history is you're going to have to turn on version history on your library or list. So you just turn on major or minor versions, whichever you want to track, and that's under the site settings. You're just going to select version history and turn it on. You'll need to create a column to log changes in SharePoint. So on a list, you'll need to create the column. I use a multiple line of text field, and then I select the option to append changes to the existing text. For a SharePoint library, you're going to use one of the existing site columns. So when under site settings, you'll see something called use existing site columns. You're going to select that. You're going to filter it out for the base columns, and you're going to select append only comments. Okay, and that will then display as a column in your SharePoint. And then, of course, now the display can be viewed from the list. So when you, and I actually did a recordings test to make sure that when we step through this, I just recorded my action. So I'm gonna show this recording and talk through it as we go through, so you can see exactly how this works. It's a pretty neat trick. I'm sure you'll find many uses for. So this is going to our demo site of SharePoint, and I'm going to just go ahead and start this. So here we start out, and this is an example of my compliance contact list. And you can see here's my validation notes, and it says view entries. I can't see it, so to get this started again, I go into version settings, and I just turn on and create version settings. So that's what I did here. So now I can go back to my compliance contacts list. Excuse me. And I can view the entries, but to view the entries, I have to click on it, and I can only view one entry at a time. For audit purposes, that would kind of be a pain because I would have to click on each entry. So what we're going to do is create a report that we can use for the auditors. So I'm going to go in to, here I selected the wrong app. I'm going to add an app, and I'm going to add, here I'm going to select a Wiki type of app. So I'm going to put in Wiki here, and we're just going to create a Wiki page. The Wiki page, I'm going to give it a name. This one I'm going to call Event Contact Validation Audit, just any name that you want. And the Wiki page comes with a lot of information a lot of times out of the box, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. And we're going to first delete that information. So I just go in, and here I edit the page, and I save it. So I edited the page, and I deleted it. The next, I'm now going to go back in and edit the page, but this time under Edit, I'm going to select Edit in SharePoint Designer. So now this is going to then automatically pull up my SharePoint Designer, and here I'm going to show you how I can add the information that I want for this page. Again, SharePoint Designer, it's a free download you can get from just browse, and you can get that from SharePoint. So I got to select advanced mode once I'm in here. And then we're going to go down, and down below at the very bottom you'll see the words zone template to zone template. Well, we want to select and put our cursor right in between those two little arrows, and that's where I'm going to start adding my information. So I go in and I go to data view, and what's really important here is don't mix this step with the next one. You got to select empty data view. You're going to select an empty data view here, and that created an area within my source code where I put in between data source and data source. Now I can start adding the data I want. So I add, here I'm going to select my compliance contacts, and the first item I'm going to add is my contact, the field that I'm using for my contact validation, which is called validation notes in this case, and we're going to select a multiple line view. So I put this in here. So now it's in. Now I want to add the rest of my data fields. So I'm going to go to options and add and remove columns. So now I just add this column, and now I can select all the different columns that might be in that contact list that I want. The company, the business phones, email addresses, the fax number, and the name of the contact, maybe their title. And then before you do anything else, after you've added these, you want to make sure that you order them in the right format. That will save you a little bit of work later. So we're just going to go through and make sure that the validation notes, I want that to be the last item on my view. So we're just going to go ahead and move things around and manipulate it so that it appears on the view that I want. Okay. And then once I'm done, I'm just going to select OK once it looks exactly the way I want it. Move the job. So I'm just kind of putting things in the order I would want. Okay, so now I can go down and see where those fields are that I've added. But the contact validation notes, this field needs to be changed. Okay, we're going to actually delete it out. Even though we added it earlier, we wanted to get in all other code that goes with it. So we're going to add the exact code that I'm putting in here. You first want to put in SharePoint append by only, and the other information. Now I've created just, I'm going ahead and putting this in here, and I think it's probably difficult for you to maybe see exactly what's being put in on the append by history. You're going to run it on the server. You got to put in the file name. Now the file name I'm going to use is the user-friendly name. So I want to go back and make sure that I'm using the right name. So you want to spell it out exactly how you have it for the user-friendly name. In this case, it's called validation notes. So I'm going to put it in there. Now, I have, in our slides, I have some exact details in step-by-step instructions on how to do what I'm showing you here right now. So you can download those slides later. But here I just wanted to show you what it would look like as you do it. Now you notice as I put in things, if you accidentally type something in, SharePoint Designer is going to let you type it in wrong. I mean, SharePoint Designer is going to let you know right away if you have an error, because it'll put like a little yellow flag, or it'll highlight it some way so you know that it isn't right. See the yellow right there next to the greater than sign, that's telling you that something's not quite right yet. So after you get done and you put in all the information, that should go away. And so here we're just going to select this ID, add ID, and then as soon as I get done here, I'll show you what this looks like. So now what we've done is once we've created and put the information in exactly how we want it, excuse me, I needed to add my one other thing there, that my closing, and you can go in and view this in the browser. So we're going to view it in the browser now, and you can see what this page looks like. It's going to accomplish what many of you probably have said, gosh, I really wish I knew how I could view the whole history. And there you go. So here's a history of the validation notes, and you can see it gives me the timestamp, who put the information in, and the comments that went associated with that. So now if you can imagine, you could use this in many different ways. Now the next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the title, because it said, I think it said demo, or it said data view. I want to put a title on the top of it. So I'm going to find where it says data view, and here's where it is. And so right in there, I can now change that title and put in a title that might make sense for my document. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. So other uses, so once you have this, you know, of course you can then print it out and give it to the auditor. The other uses that we talked about, if you wanted to see all the version history when somebody changed documents, all of that can now be viewed from a page that you can print out for the auditors. It's out of the box. SharePoint doesn't provide it, but with SharePoint Designer, you can very easily create this. So now I have a title. I want to get rid of this revert to template. So the revert to template, one last little trick we're going to show you. We're going to do this just using a content type. So we're going to edit the page. I mean, not a content type, but we're going to insert a here. We go in and insert a web part, and in the insert web part, we're going to select the median content, and we're going to put a script editor in there. And then there's some code. And again, this is in my instructions that we'll go through later, where the exact code that you're going to put in here. This just is standard code. To edit the editor, you have to go in and actually edit it. So that you've got to get that little arrow down at the bottom. You select edit web part, and now you just copy and paste the code that I'm going to provide you into this snippet. And that's the code. And that just gets rid of that display bar that we don't want to see. So here you go, and now I can just use my print functions, and I'll show you what this looks like in a print preview. And it's a nice form that I can now print out and hand to an auditor. Okay, so that's basically all I wanted to show you on that particular exercise. So are there any questions about this right now, Scott?
I'm not seeing any up on any being asked at the moment, so I think we're good on that. Your presentation, okay, I guess, is answering everyone's questions. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, we use this at Cooper Compliance in many different ways. Again, and if you need some help on how to implement this, if you get stuck, or if you want us to, we're always for hire. If you want us to help you develop any forms like this, we're more than happy to help you, and we'll have contact information at the end of this slide. Again, here's the detailed instructions. I'm not going to go through each step. Just everything we just discussed right here, you can refer back to it. It will be posted on our SharePoint site. So I've provided you some very detailed instructions, and again, make sure that you're using the friendly name, contract validation log in this case, and then and that's basically it for that particular area. So in the next area, we have 15 minutes left of this call, and as I was going through, I realized I tend to plan too much. I potentially, in this case, could have covered a little bit more, but I wanted to make sure that we left time for questions. So record declaration in compliance is really important to certain folks, especially entities that have a lot of government rules. You have certain requirements that you have to demonstrate to your taxpayers, to the government, on what your attorneys might want you to save certain documents. Well, you can declare those documents so somebody can't delete them, so that they're available once they're declared and they become an auditable piece of tool or document. Then you can declare it so that somebody can no longer edit that document. So very important to a lot of entities. It depends really on the make and structure of your company, what your attorneys want, what other type of auditing you're going to be held to. So declaration, again, it's just as a dictionary, it's a formal statement presenting the plaintiff's claim in an action. So this means that this is a document that can be used in a court case. It can be used, and for auditing, it is an auditable document. So when does a content become a record for audit? This is defined by you. So perhaps it's after drafts have been approved. You're going to create a draft of a procedure, and while it's in a draft format, you probably would not want to declare that as a record, but once it's been signed and approved, And you can use some of the approval features in SharePoint itself to do this. Then it becomes a declared document. Perhaps it's after your compliance officer has reviewed the evidence. You may decide in your company that the subject matter experts might present something and say, this is what I want to present to the auditors as an audited document. But you may want your compliance department or compliance officer to review it first to decide, do we really want this to be presented? Is this the right document that we want to be presented to the auditors? And then you can use features within SharePoint to approve and declare that record. So declaring records, you can do it two ways in SharePoint. You can have it, well, and actually I should say three ways, but it's either manually or automated. But manually, you can manually declare it by using a send to feature, and you send it to a document library that's been identified as the declared records, and you just use the send to feature to manually declare. And to do that, you simply right-click on your document, and well, depending on which feature version you're using, it's the same place where you could check a document in, check a document out. There's a send to. It's also listed in the top ribbon of your library under item and the library item type, and then you would send to, and you can, and then that would declare the record, providing you have the declaration turned on in your site settings. The other way is to automatically declare a record. So you can set up a particular library so that any time a document hits that library, it's automatically declared. The other way is to use a workflow. So you can build a workflow, an approval workflow, where the last thing you do after everything's been approved is you declare the record. Okay, once it's declared, then the settings based on how you set it up in your settings, the author cannot change the declared record. You set up, though, and you decide who can make changes, if anybody can make changes, and when it can be deleted. You need to use your site policies to identify when it can be deleted. And it's required when you set up the record declaration. You don't want to put something in and declare it forever and ever and ever, an eternity, because then you'll never ever be able to clean out your SharePoint. Obviously, 30 years from now, a document doesn't need to be available for any attorney I couldn't imagine. So you would be able to set up the time at which it expires, and then you can identify what would happen when it expires. So for record declaration settings, you can record restrictions. You can identify that there's no additional restrictions. You can block and delete a document, block it from being deleted, block it from being edited and deleted. The manual record declaration, you would available in locations by default or not available in locations by default. So you can make your entire site, or you can make it by library. And the types of declaration that can be formed are on all list contributors and administrators. So you can define who can declare a record. Only administrators, list administrators, or only policy by policy actions. So you've set up a policy in your SharePoint where you've identified when a document is declared. And then undeclaring a record can be performed by similarly, so you can identify who can, or if it's a policy action where a document is undeclared. So each list or library contains record declaration settings and information management policy settings. So you can identify no manual declaration, always allow manual declaration, never allow manual declaration of records, automatically declare a record, and then information management policies. Again, there's a whole lot around the information management policies. So what I wanted to do is kind of stop there, because it would take a lot longer than the 10 minutes that we have left, and I was more interested in knowing if other people, if you're interested in this subject, and if you are, we'd like to kind of do a survey and find out if you're interested. But before we go on, Scott, are there any questions about any of the subjects that I've already covered?
No, there aren't, but I did put up that poll about would you be interested in detailed training on record declaration on compliance, kind of a more extended version of what you're talking about, been talking about for the last 10 or 15 minutes. So we're waiting for some people to make a decision, make some recording on that. About half the people have, and it seems like there's a lot of, maybe 2/3 of the people are interested in yes, they would.
Okay.
So we'll have to see. Maybe it is worth doing then.
Yeah.
Give it another few seconds for this poll.
Scott, do we still have the poll question where we can ask about, well, if there are other specific topics that you're interested in, you can always put that in the comments section, but we're interested to know what other things you would like to know about SharePoint for NERC compliance or other compliance needs within your organization. And if you have any, put it in the chat session. It's something that Scott and I will take away and consider. We have no more scheduled training sessions, but based off from the response, we'll likely hold a couple more in the future, and just we'll keep you informed and let you know when we have those. So,
all right. So you're nearing the end then, Mary, of this? Yeah.
Yeah, I am. And so, Scott Crow Canyon has some really great products out there. These products are used all around the world. They've developed some things that are specific to NERC compliance, in particularly, many of you may be interested in the onboarding products that they've developed specific for NERC compliance to manage your SIP onboarding and offboarding. So as you're providing people access to your critical cyber systems and your critical information, there's a lot more new rules that you have to comply with under the SIP V5 and V6 standards. And what we're trying to do is put in these controls to prevent us from missing things. Well, that's what Scott's product does. It's a great product, a great tool. I encourage you to contact Crow Canyon or myself and ask for a demo. And Cooper Compliance, we've got a great tool ourselves that can be used for managing your compliance program. So we showed you how you could print out and create that form earlier, and I realized just now that I cut my video off a little bit short. I actually was showing you how we could put it into our Audit Ready tool and very quickly pull that up for use in a format later. So let me show you how that would work real quick, because I really didn't, I cut my video off. I just realized that. So we also have our tool, our Audit Ready SharePoint tool. It comes with a dashboard, a reporter, logger. We have a really cool editor for making sure that your compliance program is all documented, and it makes it easy. I had a client send me an email the other day, and he was like, wow, kudos to the editor, Mary Jo. I was able to set up a new standard in less than 13 minutes. And that's really kind of how this whole system is developed. I've been doing NERC compliance forever, it seems like now, at least since 2007. And so this format was developed by us, and specifically for managing our compliance for our clients, but it's available now for you as well. So here in this case, this is where we describe that we have event contact lists that we're using for managing compliance and validating it each year. And then I was able to very quickly click on this real-time tool. So if I were to go through and add a new edit, a new entry, it would automatically show in this. So this is how you can build compliance real-time into your system. So please contact us if you'd like any additional information. Again, our contact information is on the slides. We'll be sending you a presentation at the end of this that you can, or not a presentation, an email afterwards, you know, provide some feedback or anything else that you'd like to see. So any other comments, or should we go ahead and thank everybody for attending, Scott?
Yeah, I think we're good on this. Yeah, again, thanks everyone for attending. And if you have any questions or comments or want to see more, stay in touch with us. We'll have a recording of this available. And thanks again. Have a nice day. Hope to hear from you.